So I kind of wanted to do this off the cuff, kind of unscripted video about editor utilities in an Unreal Engine, because after talking to a bunch of other developers and doing some consulting work here and there, it's pretty evident that not nearly enough people are using them as much as they should be. They're super powerful to be able to do all kinds of stuff directly in the engine, from like modifying a bunch of textures or meshes or changing stuff in your actual world in the engine, um, all kinds of stuff. You can even extend them with like Python and do stuff that you usually couldn't do otherwise. It's also just much more efficient than trying to like do it all yourself or pay someone to go through and modify thousands of possible files, depending on your project. So I just want to kind of show off asset action utilities and editor utility widgets. They're the two most simple kind of editor utilities you can make in Unreal Engine. And this is going to be pretty simple. We're just going to modify some textures to go from being, like a 4096, a 4K texture down to like a 2K or a 1K. There's a lot of reason you might want to do that. So I'm going to swap over to Unreal Engine and then we'll go from there. So this is just a blank project that just kind of has a bunch of assets from the marketplace in it, just medieval stuff. If we look at the textures here, there's, let's just bring this over. There's 667 textures in this project. And a lot of these are like, we got a 4K here, 2K, 2K, 4K, 4K. And inside of these, they have this option for maximum texture size. That's what we really want to focus on modifying today. You could do this, by the way, inside of, like, you can select textures like this, and you can right click and go to asset actions and edit selection via property matrix, and you can modify a bunch of things in here like this. We can actually do exactly what I'm talking about right here. Maximum texture size right there. Of course, it's multiple values right now. But if you want any kind of logic to kind of change a bunch of assets without it just being bulk like that, you really want to use an editor utility. You can use, the edit via property matrix, or you could pay someone or do it yourself and go through and modify each one manually, but that kind of sucks. So let's start off with just making a new tools folder. I'm going to make a new folder. I'm going to call this tools. Try to keep everything organized. Under editor utilities, we're going to first make an editor utility to blueprint, and it's just going to be of type editor asset action utility. There's also editor utility actors, objects, libraries. The libraries are really good for just creating reusable functions that are usable at editor time. Not going to do that in this. We'll probably do that in the future. The asset action utility is really just for stuff in the content browser. So you have a bunch of assets selected and you want to do some kind of work on them. Editor utility objects, I've really only ever used for like storing data. We made this quest editor one time that required a bunch of data to be passed around between objects that were created at editor time via a utility, and we used it to store data. In retrospect, probably not the best use case of that, but it worked. And then editor utility actor, I've used in the past for like modifying stuff in a world. Like if things overlap a box, do something to them. So asset action utility, we're going to select that. And I'm just going to call this, resize texture. And once you're inside of here, you have some options. It's not a bad idea to go ahead and add supported classes. If we go ahead and add supported class, and we're working on texture, so we're just going to do texture. Scroll down the bottom here. And then we're going to make an event. Create a custom event. Oops, that's the wrong one. going to create a custom event. We're just going to call this resize texture. And we're going to call this in editor, just like that. You could also make a function, but it doesn't really matter for the sake of what we're doing. Try to keep this very simple. We're also not going to cover like the undo buffer and stuff like that. I'll maybe make a video about that in the future, but to keep this super simple, we just have a resize texture here, and we have to mark it as colon editor because that's what's actually going to show up in the context menu. So if I compile and save this and go find some textures and right click, we'll now get a new context menu here called scripted asset actions. And if we look there, we have resize texture. We can also hold down shift and click that to allow us to just go right to it and edit it. A bit of a faster way to get to the script you're trying to modify. And also because we have that texture there, if we searched instead for static meshes, that would not show up there in the context menu, which is the reason why we want that. So this script is going to be super simple. So all it's going to do is just take any textures that are 4K or larger, and we're going to take them down to 2K. So we're actually just going to do get selected assets. You can also get selected assets of class, but that's not really necessary for what we're doing right now. We're going to be casting anyway, and it's in the editor. It's fine. I'm going to do a for each loop. And off of that, we're going to cast to a texture 2D, actually. Then we actually just want to get the Y size of the texture. So we're just going to do, if this is greater, if I could spell greater, or equal to 4096, we're going to do an if it is. We're just going to set the maximum texture size to 2048. Super simple tool. We're also going to want to save this asset. So we're going to do save loaded. Just like that. Compile and save. And if we run it on, let's just check this texture here. This one's already 2K. Let's see. Let's do this barrel's wood. Okay, this one here, this is a 4K, imported 4K, displayed 4K, max in-game 4K. If we then right-click it, go to scripted asset actions, resize texture, it'll save it, super fast update there, and we open it, and there it is. Now it's displayed 2K, and the maximum texture size is set to 2K. So that works. That's the most simple version of this type of tool. It just does a simple piece of work on a bunch of things. And we could select all of these, and because we did a for each loop, it'll go through each one of them and modify them to 2K if they are 4K. And asset action utilities are great, but I really prefer editor utility widgets because it allows you to build like a front end kind of UI to better be able to use these tools in the future. And give yourself like variables as well that you can modify within a nice UI. So we're going to build a quick UI actually. If we go back to our tools folder, go to editor utilities, we're going to build an editor utility widget. I'm going to ignore the default kind of things here. We're just going to create a basic one. We're also going to call this, for proper naming conventions, EUW, resize texture. And we're going to open that. And we're going to do some very basic UI stuff. That's not what this video is about, but we're going to start with a vertical box. Put that in there. And we're going to put a button. In that button, we need to put some text so we know what the button does. We're going to name that just, resize texture. We're then going to do a horizontal box. Put that right in there. Inside of that, we're going to do another button. Actually, no, we're going to do an editable text. Let's see, just a text. Editable text box. We're going to put that into the horizontal box. And we're going to do a text as well inside of there. And then we'll make those fill the space. Make sure this is a variable. And let's just duplicate this. We have two of them. So here we're going to call this size to start reducing. Kind of a terrible name, but I think it gets the point across. These boxes are going to be for our variables. So if a texture is at this size or greater, we're going to bring it down to whatever's in this next box, which is going to be our size to reduce to. If I didn't do caps, it would be great. Size to reduce to. Again, this is not really about the UI of it in this particular case. We just want to get something in that we can see and put information into. I'm also going to give us some hint text here. So like example 4096. Just so we have something that shows up there. And do the same thing here. Make it 1024. And we're also going to change the names of these so we can actually know which ones we're accessing. So size to start. Size to start reducing value. Size to reduce. Size to reduce to value. Perfect. So then we can go back to our button here and make sure it is a variable. We'll rename that to resize texture button, just so we can actually have events on it, like on clicked. We're going to do an on clicked and go right to the event graph. For the sake of time, I'm actually just going to copy everything we did here because this tool is going to do the exact same thing as the asset action utility version. It's just going to be with a button instead and with our variables. I'm going to copy that right over. And now, instead of having these hard-coded values, we're going to bring in our two boxes here. And we're going to do a get text. And that text we need to convert to a string. I don't know why you can't convert directly from a text into an integer. You have to go from a text to a string and then to an integer. Kind of long and annoying, but is what it is. So then we can go right to an integer and plug that directly in like that. We'll do the exact same thing with our reduce to value and plug that into the maximum texture size. And then if we compile and save, we also theoretically we would want to be doing some kind of like checking to make sure it's, you know, not like alphanumeric inside of that box, but it doesn't really matter for the sake of this. We're trying to keep this super simple just to show off, hey, you can do some pretty cool stuff with these relatively simple tools. I've manually modified thousands of textures before these really existed. Back in UE4 days, there was like Utilitiy back then. But before these were really available, I've modified like thousands of textures manually or using like bulk editing, and it was awful. So it's really great that these now exist. So now if we just run this utility widget, I'm in 5.6, by the way. I didn't mention that at the start of the video. Unreal 5.6. I'm not using anything special in here that's not in earlier versions that I'm aware of, but just for note there. We're going to say 4096. Actually, let's do a different one. Let's do 2048 down to 512. And then let's find some textures here. So yeah, we'll just take these cornerstones. These are 4K. And we'll take all of these and we'll reduce all of them just like this. It'll take a second, and then if we look at them, there it is now 512. So it's really like a super simple kind of tool, you can do all kinds of things just like this and so much more inside of editor utilities. We've used them for modifying textures like this, for creating brand new materials, for modifying materials. There's like a plugin to like enable more material editing stuff. We've used them to generate facial animations by calling a Python script. Use them to like optimize scenes. They're wildly powerful. And I think what I'm going to do with this new channel is really just go into editor utilities and Unreal Engine optimization stuff, and maybe some stuff about the game we're building. This kind of stuff is super useful. I should also note that I think in 5.4, just in case someone's, screaming, you could do this already. You kind of can, via a context click here. If I go here and just move this out of the way real quick, you could do this I believe they added this in 5.4, if not mistaken. You can right click on any texture and go to texture source actions and then reduce size. And you can reduce textures just like this here. The problem with this is it is very destructive. There's times you might want to do this, but I would recommend against it always, because if you can do something non-destructively, you should. If you're a studio like ours and you have a source repository of like 600 to 800 gigabytes, a lot of that textures, it would maybe make sense to destructively modify the textures down to like 2K if you have a bunch of 4K or 8K textures. But if you can, use editor utilities, do non-destructive work. Kind of weird to put this at the end of the video, but that's okay. I didn't really plan any kind of outro to this video. I just love editor utilities. They're so awesome. And I've talked to so many game developers that just didn't know the crazy stuff you could do with them. I think a lot of people know about this kind of stuff, simple modifications. But there's also all kinds of stuff you can do that isn't even natively exposed, as like blueprint nodes, using things like set editor property. You gotta like go into the C++ or the Python reference and like find the property name and you can set it. Anyway, thanks for watching.